They always said the Great Wall of China was built to keep danger out. But what if the real danger was buried beneath it? For centuries, the wall has stretched like a stone serpent across deserts, mountains, and frozen plains, a monument to human endurance, power, and paranoia. Millions of laborers, soldiers, and souls vanished while building it. Yet even after 2,000 years, the wall keeps its own silence. The stones remember more than they reveal. And now, scientists have uncovered something no one was prepared for: a sealed labyrinth beneath its foundations, hidden chambers, rooms without doors, and something inside them that refuses to be disturbed. The story begins not with treasure hunters, but with a government survey team in 2015. They were using ground-penetrating radar to assess soil erosion under a northern section of the wall near the Hebei province. At first, the readings were routine: layers of compacted earth, broken stone, the usual. But then, a pattern appeared too geometric, too deliberate. Parallel corridors buried deep under the bedrock, aligned perfectly with the wall's direction. The signals suggested chambers, not caves, but constructed rooms. No entrances from above, no shafts, no stairs. Just sealed voids beneath the oldest layers of the wall. The scientists assumed it was an anomaly, perhaps air pockets from ancient collapses. Yet the readings continued for several kilometers. The shapes were consistent, rectangular, symmetrical, and spaced like a sequence of underground stations. They called it the sub-foundation grid. But here's where things took a darker turn. When they attempted to drill a microbore to insert a camera probe, the instruments malfunctioned. Not once, repeatedly. Every time the drill reached a certain depth, the magnetic compass began spinning wildly. The GPS lost signal, and the footage turned black. A constant low hum was reported by several crew members, though the sound didn't register on any recording. One technician described it as a heartbeat under the ground. News of the anomaly reached Beijing quietly. A joint research unit from the Chinese Academy of Sciences and the State Administration of Cultural Heritage was dispatched to verify it. Their report, now partially classified, confirmed the existence of at least 7 large hollow structures below that stretch of the wall. Each measured approximately 12 meters wide, 9 meters tall, and extended for up to 30 meters in length. The walls, according to seismic reflections, were made of something denser than stone, possibly a fused compound of clay and iron. What made them anxious wasn't just the engineering sophistication, it was the impossibility. These chambers predated the Ming Dynasty sections of the wall by centuries, maybe even millennia. It was as if the wall had been built on top of something older, as though the Ming and Qin builders had unknowingly laid their empire's defenses over an ancient tomb, or perhaps deliberately sealed something that should never resurface. The official stance was cautious, further study needed. But off the record, one archaeologist from the team told a journalist, "We don't know if this is architecture or containment." In the months that followed, small teams began limited excavation around the perimeter. They weren't allowed to dig directly above the grid, but tried to trace its extensions from nearby slopes. Within weeks, strange things began to happen. Instruments began registering unexplained heat signatures in the soil, almost like something was generating energy below. Drones malfunctioned mid-air. Workers reported dizziness and disorientation, as if an invisible pressure surrounded the area. Some locals whispered that the wall was breathing again. There were older legends, 2 almost forgotten folk tales from northern villages, stories about ghost corridors running beneath the wall where the souls of dead workers were trapped. They said the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, demanded that his engineers bury not only the bodies of the dead within the wall, but also the blueprints of the heavens themselves, cosmic maps drawn from stars no longer visible. According to one Han-era manuscript found near Jiayuguan, a sealed vault of command lay below the oldest ramparts, containing records of what came before heaven was divided from earth. Most scholars dismissed it as poetic exaggeration. But now, the ground itself was whispering that something real had been buried. The deeper the scans went, the stranger the data became. In some places, the chambers appeared to resonate, reflecting sonar pings with irregular intervals, like echoes bouncing off shifting surfaces. It was as if the rooms were changing shape. Artificial intelligence algorithms analyzing the data struggled to produce consistent 3D models. Every scan looked slightly different. To the team, It was as though the structures themselves were alive, adapting, confusing, or protecting themselves from detection. One geophysicist even joked, "Maybe it knows we're looking." No one laughed. A few months later, a narrow exploratory tunnel was bored from the side of a nearby valley, not through the wall itself, but into what they believed was an adjacent chamber. The first camera feed was unsettling. The lens entered an empty hall lined with smooth black walls, seamless, like obsidian polished to a mirror. The air was strangely clear, no dust, no organic decay, yet the instruments read oxygen traces and humidity levels identical to the surface. The temperature was a steady 13.4 degrees Celsius, but there were symbols etched faintly along the walls, visible only under infrared glyphs that didn't match any known Chinese script. They spiraled downward, like veins on skin, converging toward the floor where a faint metallic gleam shimmered beneath the dust. Before the team could zoom in, the feed cut off. The camera never responded again. What followed was silence. The tunnel was sealed. Officially, the operation was paused for safety evaluation. Unofficially, the chamber was declared restricted. Rumors leaked online. Some said a researcher who entered the shaft refused to speak afterward. Others claimed his hair had turned completely white within days. Whether superstition or trauma, no one could tell. Yet, something in the air had shifted. Scientists began to avoid the topic. The words Great Wall subchambers were quietly scrubbed from several digital archives. But what terrified them most wasn't what they found. It was what they couldn't explain. The composition of the surrounding soil changed abruptly near the chambers. Crystalline fragments resembling microglass fused by intense heat, similar to trinitite formed after nuclear explosions. But these samples were buried beneath strata dated to at least 2,000 years ago. No known ancient technology could have produced that effect. Were these traces of lightning strikes, volcanic activity, or something else entirely, an ancient energy source sealed away before the wall even existed? Some hypothesized that these chambers were remnants of pre-dynastic engineering, perhaps a forgotten civilization predating recorded Chinese history. Others whispered of extraterrestrial origin, citing similarities between the wall's alignment and certain planetary ley lines mapped by archaeoastronomers. Yet a smaller group, historians and monks from Shanxi, offered a different interpretation. They believed the chambers were ritual vaults, built not to contain treasure, but to imprison something spiritual knowledge, or entities deemed too dangerous for humanity. "You do not bury what is empty," one monk wrote. "You bury what breathes." The question then arises, why would successive dynasties build directly above such places, unless they knew what lay beneath, and chose to guard it in silence? Could the wall itself have been designed as both a defense from outside threats and a containment structure for what was already sleeping below? That possibility changes everything we think we know about the Great Wall, transforming it from a mere fortress into a cosmic boundary between the known and the forbidden. Modern engineers reviewing the radar blueprints noticed something chilling. The chambers align with old imperial watchtowers positioned at precise astronomical intervals. When connected, they form a pattern eerily similar to constellations mapped during the Warring States period, as though the wall mirrored the heavens above, and the chambers below mirrored a darker, inverted sky beneath. In ancient Taoist cosmology, heaven and earth were reflections of each other. What was above existed below. If that's true, the chambers might not just be rooms. They might be anchors in a forgotten ritual geometry, a planetary circuit designed to stabilize something vast and unseen. One researcher, Dr. Wen Jialin, who worked briefly on the site before it was sealed, later wrote in a private paper, "When we scanned the seventh chamber, the readings pulsed like a heartbeat. Every 88 seconds, a resonance wave passed through the ground as though responding to us. It was not mechanical. It was rhythmic, organic." That paper was never published. Wen later disappeared during a mountain expedition near Inner Mongolia. His notes ended with one line: "If the chambers wake, the wall will no longer be enough." Why, then, are scientists afraid to enter? Because knowledge has weight. Because sometimes, beneath the layers of earth and empire, what sleeps is not meant for human understanding. The sealed rooms might hold relics of lost dynasties. Or they might hold the memory of something that used to rule long before mankind built walls. Some legends even claim that the wall wasn't constructed to defend against invaders, but to imprison a sky serpent that fell to earth, its body petrified across the land. its heart sealed deep below. When you look at the wall's path from orbit, it does look like a fossilized creature curling through the mountains. Today, access to those coordinates is restricted. Military oversight surrounds the sector. Locals report the hum still rises at night, faint but steady, like a pulse. No one knows if the chambers are tombs, temples, or something that defies both. But the fear remains. The wall has stood for 2,000 years, not only because of stone and mortar, but because the ground beneath it wants to stay buried. And maybe that's the true purpose of walls, not to keep the world out, but to keep what's inside from ever coming out again. When the discovery teams beneath the Great Wall went silent, attention shifted from the soil to the scrolls. The answers, they hoped, might not lie underground, but in the fragments of history written before the emperors learned to hide their fears behind stone. Long before the wall became a symbol of strength, there were whispers of forbidden vaults, sealed chambers mentioned only in manuscripts that most historians dismissed as myth, and which no one dared to translate completely. These records were not about defending China from enemies outside, but from something that once stirred within. The first mention appears in a collection of bamboo texts found in 1978 near Shuihudi, attributed to a Qin-era archivist. One line, faded and nearly erased, speaks of dark halls that breathe below the dragon's spine. The dragon's spine was an ancient nickname for the northern ridges, the very mountain line where the wall now stretches. The archivist warns that these halls were built for the silence of the heavens, and that to open them is to let the sky remember its wound. Scholars once thought this was poetic symbolism, the way ancient writers described natural caves. But the language is deliberate. Constructed halls, sealed by decree, catalogued under imperial secrecy. It suggests a bureaucracy of burial not for people, but for knowledge. Over centuries, scattered hints re-emerged. In Han Dynasty records, an imperial order known as the Edict of the Black Vault forbade excavation in several frontier zones, citing the resting libraries of those who disobeyed the stars. The edict lists coordinates using star maps instead of landmarks, aligning perfectly with sections of the Great Wall later reinforced during the Ming era. Historians, puzzled by this celestial mapping, ignored the metaphors. But to some sinologists, it sounded like something else, an encoded warning. The vaults were not just underground. They were part of a cosmic pattern that mirrored the constellations themselves. 1,000 years later, Tang-era monks compiled the Jinglu Chronicles, a vast compendium of supernatural geography. Volume 43 mentions the vaults of the eastern wind, where the architects of heaven imprisoned their own designs. According to the monks, these vaults predated even the first dynasties. They described them as rooms without time, sealed by an alloy that feeds on air but does not rust. For centuries, that passage was treated as metaphorical. But when scientists in the modern era uncovered traces of iron clay composite beneath the wall, a material that remains unoxidized after 2 millennia, the coincidence felt like history winking from the abyss. Another record, rarer and more dangerous, surfaced in 1912, when a Taoist scholar named Li Sheng recovered a scroll from a collapsed monastery in Gansu province. It was titled The 9 Keys of Earthly Balance. The text warned that beneath each emperor's shadow lies a chamber built by those who feared light more than death. The handwriting changed midway through, as though copied by trembling hands. One verse read, "He who opens the forbidden vault shall see his reflection in stone, but the stone will not forget." When Li attempted to translate further, he fell ill, claiming his dreams were filled with corridors of black mirrors whispering his name. The manuscript was later confiscated by the National Library, labeled as a cultural anomaly. It has never been displayed publicly. But the most chilling evidence came from the Book of Mountains and Seas, the Shanhai Jing China's mythological geography text, compiled over 2,000 years ago. Hidden between tales of phoenixes and sea monsters is a brief passage describing stone houses beneath the wall of the northern border, where the breath of gods was hidden. The original term used for breath is qi sheng, not mere air, but living essence. The breath of gods was hidden, could imply an energy or even an entity, sealed beneath the earth. And if the ancient engineers of the wall were aware of these tales, the structure might have been deliberately aligned to sit above these houses, not randomly across the landscape, but with surgical precision. Historians once laughed at the idea of forbidden vaults, but Chinese emperors were obsessed with immortality, alchemy, and control over the unseen. The first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, famously constructed his vast underground mausoleum guarded by the terracotta army, a labyrinth designed not for the living, but to preserve a universe for the dead. If that emperor had knowledge of other chambers predating his own dynasty, would he have dared to build above them, or worse, to replicate them? Some fragments from the records of the Grand Historian mention that during Qin's campaigns, his engineers discovered an older wall beneath the wall. It was dismissed as geological metaphor, but centuries later, Ming historians reinterpreted it as literal. The older wall referred to an underlying layer of sealed chambers that the Qin chose not to disturb. Their decision was codified in a decree known as the Silent Law. The edict stated, "The ground beneath the barrier shall remain untouched, for what guards the empire also guards the unseen." This decree was never revoked. It simply faded from memory, like the echo of a door that was once closed and never opened again. Then came the Jesuit missionaries of the 17th century, fascinated by China's ancient science. Among their letters, one stands out, a 1648 note from Father Matteo Ricci's successor, Father Ludovico Buglio, who described meeting a retired imperial astronomer. The astronomer told him of star vaults buried under the northern wall, where instruments of unknown metal were entombed. They were said to hum faintly during eclipses. Buglio wrote, "He spoke as one recalling a dream, yet his fear was that of a man who remembers too much." The Vatican archived that letter without translation. It resurfaced only in 2009, when sinologists rediscovered it in a forgotten crate. Even modern archaeology has brushed against these records and recoiled. In 1996, during restoration near the Badaling section, workers unearthed an iron plaque with indecipherable etchings. Experts believed it to be a Ming-era boundary marker until ultraviolet analysis revealed micro-engraved characters invisible to the naked eye. The fourth vault sleeps. Disturb not the breath of the ninth echo. No one has been able to decode what ninth echo means, but some physicists studying infrasound have noted unusual low-frequency vibrations along that section of the wall, especially on moonless nights. Coincidence, perhaps, or warning. What ties all these records together, bamboo slips, scrolls, imperial edicts, Jesuit notes, and modern finds, is a single theme: containment. Each text warns not of what's outside, but of what lies beneath. The ancients called them vaults because the word implied sacredness. A vault wasn't merely storage. It was a promise between humanity and the divine, a place where the boundary between worlds was physically built. To open it meant to break that covenant. And yet, human curiosity keeps returning. During the Cultural Revolution, many old texts were burned, but one librarian in Xi'an, Zhao Renwu, secretly copied a section of a banned manuscript called The Chronicle of the Buried Kings. He later testified that it described 9 subterranean gates stretching under the wall's western reach. Each gate corresponded to a dynasty that had fallen. When the 10th gate opened, it said, "The sky will fold over the earth." Zhao disappeared shortly after he tried to publish his notes. His colleagues claimed he became obsessed with digging behind the library's old foundation, convinced he heard metal breathing below. His notes end mid-sentence. "They are not gone. They are waiting for the emperor who built no tomb." The concept of forbidden vaults isn't unique to China. Across cultures, the motif recurs: ancient repositories sealed from human touch. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians spoke of the Ekur, the mountain house, built to imprison divine weapons. The Egyptians had their house of life, hidden chambers beneath temples said to contain maps of the underworld. And in India's Kerala state, the sealed Vault B of the Padmanabha Swami temple has resisted entry for centuries, its door said to echo with serpentine hissing when disturbed. Could these be scattered echoes of a shared ancient memory, a global effort to hide something civilization once knew and then chose to forget? Back in China, a recently declassified satellite survey in 2021 detected faint subsurface anomalies stretching in a line parallel to the wall, resembling connected cavities. When historians compared their positions with ancient star charts from the Book of Silk Astronomy, they realized each site aligned with one of the 9 forbidden stars, celestial bodies believed to govern fate and disaster. If intentional, this alignment suggests the wall itself was designed as a map, an enormous lock, whose key was written in the sky. The vaults might not simply contain artifacts, but information possibly encoded in geometry, vibration, or materials that interact with the planet's magnetic field. One translation from the Jade Emperor Annals offers a haunting clue. When heaven fell, those who knew bound its memory in iron and placed it beneath the dragon's back. So long as the dragon sleeps, the wound will not reopen. Scholars debate what heaven fell means: a meteor strike, a cosmic event, or perhaps the collapse of a previous cycle of civilization. The ancients may have preserved that catastrophe, locking its remnants away to prevent recurrence. If so, the forbidden vaults could be more than tombs, they could be time capsules of extinction. Yet something about them still moves. Modern magnetometers detect subtle rhythmic pulses around those coordinates. Geologists call it piezoelectric discharge pressure changes in minerals releasing current. But those pulses repeat every 88 seconds, the same period Dr. Wen Jialin once recorded before vanishing. Ancient texts often mention the number 9 or its double 18 as the breath interval of the Earth. What if those ancient authors weren't speaking metaphorically? What if they were measuring something real, a living rhythm beneath the crust? This is why the records were labeled forbidden. They weren't myths. They were warnings disguised as poetry. And those who tried to decode them often paid insanity. Language itself becomes a kind of infection when it approaches the truth. The ancients may have learned that knowledge too vast must be hidden in symbols only time can translate. That's why so many of these scrolls end abruptly, their last lines fading mid-sentence, as if the writers heard something behind them and stopped. Today, as archaeologists translate more unearthed fragments, a pattern emerges. Every record describing the vaults uses the same phrase, the sound of breathing under stone. The same phrase found carved into a bronze bell unearthed near Dunhuang. The same phrase appearing in a Han-era poem that describes the Earth as a sleeper chained by walls. Could it be coincidence that the Great Wall, humanity's longest chain, was built directly above where the Earth is said to breathe? When we piece together these records, the image that forms is chillingly deliberate. The wall wasn't just a boundary between nations. It was a lid, a monument built on top of something that predated dynasties, kings, and perhaps mankind itself. The ancient scribes knew it, the emperors feared it, and the modern scientists now standing over those sealed foundations can feel that same unease, that same pulse from below. Because maybe the vaults aren't waiting to be opened. Maybe they are waiting for someone to remember why they were sealed in the first place. It began with a sound that wasn't supposed to exist, a faint metallic pulse buried beneath stone and silence, echoing through the scanners like a whisper from the bones of the Earth. When the survey team began their deep resonant scans beneath the Great Wall's restricted zone, they expected bedrock, soil compression, and the dull rhythm of iron ore veins. Instead, the instrument sang. It wasn't static. It wasn't geological noise. It was a sequence, a harmonic pulse that rose and fell in precise intervals, too regular to be natural, too faint to be man-made. Something metallic was answering their signals from deep below the sealed chambers. The initial readings came from a magnetotelluric survey designed to map conductivity layers. The data showed a dense metallic anomaly stretching along the same coordinates as the forbidden vaults. The problem? It wasn't a single object. It was an interconnected lattice, thousands of meters wide, behaving like one continuous structure. When the team tried to isolate the frequency, it responded. Not passively, not as echo, but as resonance. Each scan returned a slightly different harmonic pattern, as if the metal below was adapting to the waves, matching the frequency like something intelligent, adjusting its breath to the rhythm of the intruders above. At first, the scientists assumed a technical malfunction. Instruments were recalibrated, new coils brought in, even international teams from seismic institutes invited under strict confidentiality. Yet every test repeated the same anomaly, an electromagnetic field dense enough to distort compasses within a 300-meter radius. The soil above showed trace magnetization inconsistent with local geology. This meant only one thing: there was metal down there, massive, structured, and ancient, and not the kind of metal nature creates by chance. The Chinese Academy of Geological Sciences compared the readings with known mineral signatures: iron, nickel, copper, even meteorite alloys, but nothing fit. The reflection coefficients were too clean, too symmetrical. Metallic, yes, but refined in a way even modern metallurgy couldn't reproduce without leaving isotopic residue. The readings indicated near zero oxidation. That suggested either a perfect vacuum or a self-sealing material. Impossible for a structure that, by all dating methods, had been entombed for over 2,000 years. Unless, of course, it wasn't just sealed, it was alive. When they pushed deeper, the sensors began to behave strangely. Electronic noise spiked into fractal bursts. The magnetometer needles began oscillating between north and east every few seconds, following a rhythm like breathing. One researcher, a young geophysicist named Lin Tao, noticed that the oscillations weren't random. They followed the Fibonacci sequence 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 before repeating. That pattern doesn't appear in raw geological phenomena. It appears in growth, in organic formation, in the mathematics of life. What was the metal trying to mimic? To confirm the data, the team deployed low-frequency ground-penetrating radar. The results came back blurred, as though the subsurface structure was scattering the waves deliberately. One frame, though, captured something haunting. A reflection in the shape of a dome, with inner rings resembling concentric coils. The report described it as a metallic echo chamber embedded within the rock. The engineers joked it looked like a heart, until the reading spiked again and the heart began pulsing in rhythm with their instruments. Weeks later, a second team attempted a muon tomography scan, the same technology used to explore the Great Pyramid of Giza. Cosmic particles passing through the wall revealed unexpected density voids beneath the foundations, forming what looked like a continuous corridor of metallic veins. But these veins were perfectly aligned to the wall's curvature. It was as if the ancient builders had laid the wall over a machine one designed to hide within the earth, powered by forces no dynasty could understand. A classified report described the readings as a metallic organism spanning over 17 kilometers, maintaining structural coherence without corrosion. It was quietly filed under geological phenomena unexplained. The deeper they scanned, the stranger it became. The readings emitted electromagnetic bursts exactly every 88 seconds, the same mysterious interval noted by Dr. Wen Jialin before his disappearance. To verify, the team left passive sensors overnight. By morning, the data showed spikes at precisely the same intervals, synchronized across all devices. Even instruments stored miles away recorded faint traces, suggesting the phenomenon wasn't localized. It radiated outward, like a heartbeat echoing through the planet's crust. When they played back the raw data as audio, it sounded like a low metallic drone rising and falling, breathing through stone. Locals had their own explanation. They said the wall had a spirit, the dragon of the north, that it wasn't built stone by stone, but scale by scale, over the sleeping body of something buried. The metallic readings, they said, were the dragon's veins still warm, still dreaming. Scientists laughed at that, until the night the readings changed. During a late scan, one technician reported a sudden burst of static that knocked out all communication lines. For 3 full minutes, every monitor in the lab went black. When power returned, the data logs displayed a new sequence binary numbers, perfectly ordered, repeating 0 1 0 0 1 0 0 0 0 1 0 0 0 1 0 1 0 1 0 0 1 1 0 0 0 1 0 1 0 0 0 0. When translated from ASCII, it spelled one word: help. The team dismissed it as digital corruption, but the programmer who checked the logs confirmed the pattern wasn't random. It was embedded deep in the analog storage waveform, too low level to be software noise. Someone or something had answered back through the magnetic pulse of the Earth. After that, the project was halted. The government cited electronic interference hazards, but inside the team, people began resigning. Lin Tao left first, leaving behind only a note. The signal isn't from below, it's from between. No one understood what he meant. Rumors circulated that fragments of the metallic structure had been extracted before the shutdown. A few grams of silvery dust allegedly sent to a Beijing laboratory for isotopic testing. The results, never officially released, leaked through a technician's online forum weeks later. The sample contained isotopic ratios not found in any terrestrial metal traces of iridium, osmium, and an unknown element with an atomic structure inconsistent with the periodic table. The report ended abruptly. The sample generates measurable magnetic potential even when isolated in vacuum, possible self-sustaining energy field. The account disappeared hours after posting. Then came the interference. Satellite communications over the region began glitching during scans. GPS coordinates drifted by several meters. Drone compasses spun unpredictably. Pilots reported turbulence when flying over that segment of the wall, as if the air itself vibrated. Even birds avoided the area, migrating around it in perfect arcs. Locals called it the silent band. When night fell, a faint shimmer appeared along the ground, not light, but distortion, like heat rippling through cold air. Some said if you stood close enough, you could hear a low hum vibrating through your chest, like the wall beneath your feet was alive. As the metallic readings intensified, researchers discovered something even more bizarre. The frequencies seemed to respond to human presence. When multiple people stood near the sensors, the harmonic peaks shifted, almost as if the field was detecting consciousness itself. A neuroscientist invited to observe the data noticed faint brainwave interference. The alpha rhythms of nearby individuals began syncing with the magnetic oscillations. People standing near the scan zone reported vivid dreams. Afterward, dreams of corridors, blue lights, and a sound like distant thunder turning into a whispering voice. Some began hearing it even while awake. After the third case of auditory hallucination, the program was suspended indefinitely. Unofficially, several copies of the raw data were sent to independent labs in Germany, Japan, and Russia. Each reported the same impossible feature. The frequency contained encoded geometric harmonics ratios corresponding to the Platonic solids, mathematical constants embedded within the signal. It was as though the field wasn't random energy, but structured communication, designed to interact with the human nervous system. If so, then the metal below wasn't just a relic. It was an interface, a sleeping network, waiting for something or someone capable of understanding its language. One cryptologist who analyzed the resonance pattern suggested that the metal might not be metal at all, but a crystalline matrix engineered to store information through electromagnetic phase shifts, a kind of prehistoric data core, buried beneath one of humanity's oldest structures. If true, then every 88-second pulse could be a data ping, a memory echoing through time. But who built it? And why hide it beneath a wall that would survive millennia? The oldest texts mention that the wall followed the dragon lines of the earth, the ancient ley currents that connect mountain to mountain, horizon to horizon. If those myths were descriptions of electromagnetic corridors, then the wall wasn't placed arbitrarily. It was engineered to align with a global current, forming a circuit. And the metallic lattice beneath it might have been its core, a planetary capacitor, storing energy, regulating the Earth's field like an ancient battery. Perhaps the ancients discovered something about the Earth's resonance, something too powerful to leave exposed. So they buried it beneath the longest wall mankind would ever build, a wall that doubles as both barrier and containment. When modern physicists reconstructed the data model of the metallic field, they noticed that the pulses weren't uniform. They carried phase modulation, subtle shifts in timing that resembled encoded messages. One segment, stretched and sonified, produced a haunting rhythm that mirrored a human heartbeat. Another matched Schumann resonance frequencies, the electromagnetic oscillation of Earth's atmosphere. It was as if the structure was synchronized not to our machines, but to the planet itself. When they overlaid the data on global magnetic maps, faint resonances appeared thousands of kilometers away in Siberia, Mongolia, even Tibet. The same intervals, the same metallic heartbeat. Whatever lies beneath the wall might be connected to a network stretching across continents, an ancient system buried under the skin of the world. And that's why scientists are terrified, because the more they try to understand it, the more the readings seem to understand them. Instruments adapt, frequencies mirror their tests, and the hum grows louder with each attempt. It's no longer just data, it's interaction. The ground listens. The metal remembers. The wall, perhaps, is not just stone over earth, but thought over memory, a conversation between the planet and the past. So, the project was buried again, sealed beneath bureaucratic silence. The instruments were dismantled. The tunnels collapsed. Yet sometimes, when satellites pass over the northern ridges, faint magnetic ripples still appear, spelling patterns no one has yet decoded. The dragon sleeps, they say, but even in sleep, it dreams in metal. Because maybe the Great Wall doesn't merely guard China, maybe it guards the planet itself. The deeper the scientists dug into the mystery, the more they realized that the Great Wall's silence wasn't only geological, it was historical, a silence that had been manufactured, layer by layer, through centuries of deliberate forgetting. Beneath the metal echoes and forbidden vaults, there were rumors older than the wall itself. Rumors that no ruler wanted preserved in the official chronicles. Whispers of entire armies, buried alive within its foundations. At first, it sounded like folklore, the kind of story peasants tell to explain why their ancestors never returned. But as archaeologists followed the wall's path through the northern provinces, they began finding strange anomalies. Bones fused into stone, armor embedded in ancient mortar, and mass burial pits that didn't match any recorded battle. Some sections of the wall, especially the early Qin fortifications, contained dense layers of compacted earth, mixed with crushed bones so densely packed that even modern excavation tools struggle to pierce them. Historians once called it superstition. But ground-penetrating radar has shown something far stranger. In certain zones, beneath the lowest strata of the wall, there are distinct human silhouettes, hundreds, sometimes thousands, standing upright. Not collapsed in chaos, not scattered in death, but standing, shoulder to shoulder, as if frozen mid-march. The official explanation is that these are construction sacrifices, a grim but well-known practice in ancient China. When great structures were built, bridges, tombs, palaces, workers, or soldiers were sometimes entombed within them, as offerings to the spirits of endurance and protection. The wall, being the largest construction in human history, would have demanded the largest sacrifice. Yet, what makes this story unbearable isn't the ritual itself, it's the scale. According to unverified Qing Dynasty documents recovered from the Beijing archives, the number of laborers who died during the wall's construction could have reached 1 million. That figure alone is horrifying, but the same record mentions that some were not merely buried after death. They were sealed alive. So the wall may never fall, it reads, men became its mortar. These words are written in faded brushstrokes, as if the author trembled while recording them. The passage was later censored from reprints of the Imperial Archive, replaced with a blank space. But a surviving scholar's copy in private hands confirms the phrase existed. Archaeologists near the Liaoning sector once unearthed a section of the wall where the foundation stones were bound together with what appeared to be human hair, braided, blackened, and fossilized by time. DNA tests, quietly conducted decades later, confirmed human origin. There are reports never made public of skeletal remains found clutching bronze tools still embedded in unfinished stonework, as if the workers were sealed mid-construction, suffocated before they could flee. Some even appear to have been chained together. One 19th century traveler, the British explorer Thomas Child, described hearing local guides say that beneath every 10 feet of the wall lies a soldier who will never leave his post. At the time, Western audiences dismissed this as exotic exaggeration. But what if those guides weren't being poetic? What if they were recounting a truth passed down through generations, that the wall's strength didn't come only from stone and labor, but from the living energy of those trapped inside? There is a particularly disturbing record from the Book of the Northern Armies, a military logbook dating to the Warring States period. It tells of a failed mutiny during the early phase of construction. A garrison of rebel soldiers reportedly refused to continue building, claiming that they had seen faces in the mortar and heard breathing beneath the earth. The rebellion was crushed within a day, and the survivors, numbering over 4,000, were ordered to be merged into the foundation. The phrase is chillingly literal. According to the document, General Meng Tian himself oversaw the sealing of the pits, declaring, "They shall guard the wall forever." Modern excavations have uncovered sealed trenches consistent with that description. Beneath one tower, archaeologists found a layer of compacted human remains mixed with lime, intentionally burned to fuse with the soil. Carbon dating placed the event around 212 BCE, precisely when Meng Tian commanded the northern front. Official reports describe it as a funerary layer, but some workers who participated claim to have heard faint metallic ringing while digging, as if the bones themselves were vibrating. Even stranger, these burial zones often overlap with the metallic readings detected in modern scans. It's as if the energy of the dead, the iron from their weapons, and the minerals in their blood became one continuous circuit, amplifying whatever electromagnetic pulse radiates beneath. Some physicists theorize that the combination of organic and metallic compounds could have created a primitive bioelectric matrix, a natural conductor linking human remains with the mysterious alloy structures deeper below. In other words, the wall's haunted reputation might not just be spiritual, it could be electromagnetic memory, an ancient human signal, eternally fused with the ground. Chinese folklore has long described the wall as alive, a breathing barrier that feeds on loyalty and fear. In the Shaanxi region, villagers still perform a ritual each spring, offering rice wine to the sleeping soldiers of the wall. They pour it into cracks between stones, whispering for mercy from the men who still listen. Some claim that during heavy rain, the wall exudes a faint red liquid, not rust, but iron oxide leached from centuries-old blood. Geologists explain it as natural oxidation, but to the locals, it's the wall weeping for the buried. Then there are the songs, ancient forbidden work chants passed down by laborers' descendants. One haunting verse recorded in 1934 translates to, "Lay my bones beneath the stones, seal my breath in dust and tone, for when the wall begins to moan, the dead will rise to guard their own." The melody, when analyzed by musicologists, follows a harmonic pattern eerily similar to the low-frequency vibrations detected during modern ground scans. Could it be coincidence, or did the ancients encode the wall's hidden frequency into their chants, preserving its resonance through song? Historical evidence hints that successive dynasties knew what lay beneath. During the Han period, repair orders for collapsed sections instructed builders to preserve the resting ranks. The Tang emperors called those zones the sleeper foundations. Ming-era reports mention entire platoons of soldiers vanishing during restoration, swallowed by sudden sinkholes that opened beneath their feet. The official explanation was subsidence. But survivors spoke of hearing drums below the ground moments before the collapse. Their stories were buried with them, just another layer of silence. Some historians now propose a horrifying possibility, that the Great Wall wasn't just manned by living soldiers above it, was fortified by dead ones below, a human energy field intentionally created through sacrifice, meant to give the wall its indestructible will. Even modern engineers are stunned by how certain ancient sections resist erosion better than newer parts built with advanced mortar. The secret may lie not in chemistry, but in resonance, the merging of human biological trace metals with the mysterious subterranean alloy. The wall's foundation could literally be humming with the magnetic remnants of those lives. In 1974, not far from where the Terracotta Army was unearthed, farmers digging a well struck a cavity filled with rusted spears fused into a single mass, like an iron root system. Within it, human bones were entwined, their skulls facing upward, mouths open as if still gasping for air. Local legend calls them the Watchers who didn't blink. That site was sealed off within weeks and declared a protected heritage anomaly. But photographs taken before closure show inscriptions carved on the inner stone, crude characters meaning "still standing." Some modern researchers suspect that these mass burials were not merely punishment or superstition, but containment operations. If the chambers below the wall held ancient forces or technologies, perhaps the emperors used human sacrifice to bind them living seals powered by the life force of thousands. In Taoist ritual, breath qi is energy. To trap breath beneath stone is to create eternal vigilance. The soldiers entombed alive would become guardians, their essence fused into the wall's electromagnetic field. They would not die, they would wait. One particularly macabre folk tale from Inner Mongolia tells of a night every century when the wall shifts its weight. Locals swear they can hear faint footfalls echoing inside, like soldiers marching in the dark. No wind, no tremor, just rhythm. Some believe it's the buried armies changing formation, responding to commands from something still deeper below, the same metallic hum scientists detect every 88 seconds. A resonance not of machines, but of memory. And yet, every time researchers approach the subject, their work vanishes. Records disappear, excavation permits revoked. The phrase buried armies is officially labeled myth, but the evidence keeps surfacing in bones, in readings, in silence. The Great Wall's builders might have created more than a monument. They might have constructed a prison made of flesh and faith, powered by sacrifice and sealed with fear. Perhaps that's why the wall still stands while empires fall. It's not stone alone that endures. It's the weight of everything buried inside. 1,000,000 lives compressed into a single purpose: Every brick, every tower, every echo of the wind along its length might be a whisper from those still guarding the frontier of the unknown. And maybe, when scientists listen too closely with their machines, when they send their radar and magnetic waves too deep, the wall listens back. Not through the hum of metal this time, but through the heartbeat of its oldest inhabitants, the soldiers who never left their posts, the armies who became the wall itself. They say every wall hides a door, but beneath the Great Wall of China, there are doors that hide from even time itself. No hinges, no handles, no seams of weakness, just smooth stone, carved with patterns that seem to shift under the light. Doors that look like the Earth's own skin, and yet, every instrument says, they are hollow on the other side. After the discovery of the buried armies and the metallic readings that pulsed through the ground, the teams focused on what the scans revealed next. Vertical voids, perfectly rectangular, sealed by dense material unlike any natural formation. They appeared like entrances, but entrances that never wanted to be opened. The first was found near the Jiayuguan Pass, hidden behind centuries of erosion. A radar echo suggested a chamber behind it, 12 meters deep, yet no fissure or crack allowed entry. The surface was polished stone, as if fused shut by heat or by intention. When a small section was drilled for sampling, the bore snapped at only 8 centimeters. The core sample showed something that defied classification. Minerals arranged in microlayers like laminated glass, but fused with metallic traces forming an alloy no one could reproduce. It was as if the door wasn't built from stone at all, but from compressed time. Geologists called it a metamorphic anomaly, something formed under pressure impossible to achieve without technology. But historians noted something else, that ancient records from the Book of the Earth Spirits described heaven's gate sealed by fire that forgets its maker. When the translation was re-examined, the phrase fire that forgets might have meant self-repairing matter, something that refuses to stay open once closed. If that's true, then those doors were not meant to be breached by any human hand. In 2019, a classified exploration team used ultrasonic mapping to model one of these doors in 3 dimensions. The structure's density fluctuated as though it were breathing, slight expansions and contractions at the rhythm of 0.7 hertz. At first, the scientists assumed thermal changes caused by the equipment, but when the instruments were turned off, the breathing continued. The door moved on its own, only by micrometers, invisible to the eye, but enough to register as pulse. One geophysicist whispered, "It's as if it's listening for a password." From above ground, magnetic resonance imaging showed faint concentric rings spreading from the door's perimeter, radiating like ripples through the soil. The frequency of those ripples matched the same 88-second pulse discovered earlier. The implication was horrifying. The doors weren't random artifacts. They were synchronized parts of a larger mechanism. Something beneath was locked away, and these doors were the locks. Ancient texts mention similar barriers. In the records of the divine builders written around the late Zhou dynasty, there is reference to black gates of mourning, closed when the stars wept. It says that those who tried to open them grew silent and walked backward into dust. Scholars long dismissed it as allegory for celestial alignments, but if we read it literally, if those doors were real, it means ancient builders knew exactly where they were and were warned never to disturb them. One archaeologist, Dr. Mei Jilan, studied the site's acoustics. When low-frequency sound waves were directed toward the sealed doors, the reflected echoes formed standing wave patterns that produced harmonic overtones, tones similar to Tibetan temple bells. Dr. Mei noticed the resonance corresponded to the pitch of human speech. She theorized that the door could be sound-sensitive, perhaps designed to react to specific frequencies. So the team tried to replicate ancient chanting rhythms described in old Taoist rites. For a moment, one sensor registered a fluctuation. The door's surface temperature dropped by 2 degrees. Then the power went out. Every battery in the camp drained simultaneously, and the hum in the ground stopped for the first time in weeks. When the power returned, the radar image behind the door was blank. Whatever was there had disappeared, as if the chamber itself had turned to solid rock. The team never tried again. But that wasn't the only sealed gate. In another location, near the Ningxia desert section, locals told stories of a door that glows when the moon is black. Satellite imagery confirmed strange reflections at that site, short-lived bursts of infrared light visible only during new moon phases. When scientists installed sensors nearby, they found spikes of ionization in the air, as though static electricity were bleeding through the ground. The readings coincided with an ancient legend that these gates feed on darkness. The phrase puzzled everyone until spectral analysis revealed that the stone absorbed more light than it reflected, its surface scattering coefficient close to zero. It literally drank light. No known mineral behaves that way. Some called it the shadow door. Those who got close described sensations of vertigo, like standing near the edge of a vast drop, even though the ground was flat. A faint humming in the ears, a smell of ozone, like before lightning. And sometimes, if you stood there long enough, you'd hear it. A sound not from the air, but from inside your bones. A whisper that seemed to come from the door itself. A vibration, low and mournful, as if something behind it were dreaming in metal. In 2022, new quantum resonance scans, developed for deep subsurface imaging, revealed even more unsettling details. Each sealed doorway appeared to correspond to a node within a geometric lattice that stretched for miles under the wall's foundation. The pattern formed a massive network, triangular, repeating, symmetrical. At each vertex, a sealed gate. In the center, a void. The structure's layout bore uncanny resemblance to ancient diagrams of the Bagua, the Taoist map of cosmic balance. It was as if the wall's builders had replicated the architecture of the universe itself underground, each sealed door guarding one aspect of creation. But what terrified researchers most was the age. Radiometric testing of trace dust particles trapped near the seams dated the material to at least 6,000 years, long before the first emperor, long before recorded Chinese civilization. Who built a network that old? And why would the greatest engineers of later dynasties choose to bury it instead of claiming it? One theory suggests the doors aren't entrances at all. They're valves, pressure gates designed to regulate something beneath, something that must never surface. In Taoist cosmology, the underworld isn't just a place of spirits. It's a mirror dimension, the shadow of existence itself. If the ancient texts describing forbidden vaults were true, then these doors could be the literal boundaries between worlds, constructed technology to seal a rift in reality. And the wall, above them, was the lid. During a nighttime drone survey, one operator noticed something chilling. Infrared footage captured faint linear glows along the wall's base, outlining invisible seams exactly where the sealed doors lay buried. The light pulsed faintly, synchronized with the same 88-second cycle that haunted every previous study. Then, for exactly 8 seconds, one of the doors flickered bright red, hotter than the surrounding rock, before cooling again. No explosion, no movement, no sound. Just a single pulse, like an eye opening and closing beneath the soil. The next day, magnetic compasses within 5 kilometers spun in circles for hours. Local villagers claimed their livestock refused to cross certain parts of the land. Even cell signals faltered, as if the ground itself was bending electricity. Officials sealed off the site, claiming unstable geomagnetic interference. But workers in the area spoke differently. They said the door had sighed. Archaeologists revisiting older folklore realized that stories of gates that breathe appear across northern China's oral tradition. One ancient ballad speaks of a gate that inhales men and exhales silence. Another describes a wall that grows heavier when stared at. Poetry, perhaps. But how do poets predict radiation signatures, thermal pulses, or perfectly sealed geometries thousands of years before science can measure them? Some speculate that the doors are conscious, not alive in the human sense, but aware. They respond to observation, to intent. Quantum researchers studying observer effects have found that the act of measurement can alter certain electromagnetic fields. What if these ancient gates operate on the same principle, remaining closed precisely because they know they are being watched? To open them might require not tools, but a state of mind, a resonance between the observer and the object, a concept ancient mystics called heaven's listening. One researcher theorized that these doors were once part of a defense system built by a lost civilization that understood consciousness as energy. When that civilization fell, perhaps in a cataclysm now buried by myth, it sealed away its remaining technology to prevent misuse. Over time, the wall's builders discovered remnants of that system, misunderstood it, and used it as a foundation, unknowingly reactivating a sleeping network. Each door became a locked circuit node, storing information, power, and memory. What lies behind them? No one knows. But during one experiment, when a laser interferometer passed over the site, the returning signal showed interference patterns resembling binary data. When translated visually, it formed the image of a spiral, the same spiral carved on the walls of the first uncovered chamber. Some say it's coincidence. Others believe it's a message, a map inward, a way home for whatever was locked inside. Even now, the sealed doors remain untouched. Engineers who tried to cut samples reported that blades dulled instantly, heat torches sputtered out, and electrical tools drained within minutes. It's as if the material feeds on energy, or perhaps it recognizes intrusion and simply refuses to yield. One worker described hearing a deep clang, like a gong struck underwater after touching the stone. His hand blistered, though the surface measured no heat. He never returned to the site. Perhaps that's why modern scientists no longer call them doors. In official papers, they're labeled non-reactive geomorphic surfaces. But to those who have stood before them, to those who have heard that impossible hum, they are still doors. Doors that know they are doors, and doors that do not wish to be opened. So, the question remains, not what lies behind them, but why they're closed at all. Maybe the Great Wall's greatest secret isn't what it protects, but what it imprisons. And those sealed gates, shimmering in the dark, are not warnings to us. They are warnings to what waits inside, that the world above has moved on, and that the age of silence must continue. Because if those doors ever remember how to open, the wall above them might no longer be enough to keep the past asleep. They say gold glitters brightest before it vanishes into darkness, and for centuries the Great Wall of China has been whispered to guard more than borders. It guards the dreams and greed of emperors who wanted eternity itself. Beneath the stone, beneath the sealed doors and buried armies, legends speak of something more forbidden. Treasure cursed by the first emperors, sealed so that no dynasty, no mortal hand could ever claim it again. The oldest of these stories begins with Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor who united China, and who feared death more than any man who ever lived. He sought immortality through alchemists, through elixirs made of mercury and jade, through gods who never answered. Yet his obsession left traces not only in his mausoleum at Xi'an, but in places far north along the early foundations of the wall, where workers spoke of convoys carrying sealed chests at night, guarded by soldiers who never returned. They called it the Procession of the Silent Gold. No record exists in official chronicles, but a fragment of bamboo text unearthed near Gansu tells of 12 wagons bearing the heart of the empire, buried beneath the dragon's scales. The phrase dragon scales was an ancient term for the wall's ridges. The text warns that those treasures were not to enrich, but to contain. Some historians interpret it as metaphor the emperor burying symbols of power to humble himself before heaven. Yet others believe it was literal, an act of sealing, not sacrifice. Because among the buried artifacts, there were said to be relics forged not by men, but by something that came before them. According to a Tang Dynasty manuscript known as the Annals of Shadow Metal, the emperor's court discovered an alloy that shimmered like liquid light, impossible to melt or break. The alchemists believed it was a heavenly substance, fallen from the sky, perhaps meteoric iron. But when they tried to forge it into coins, strange things happened. Workers reported visions of cities burning, skies cracking open, and voices speaking through the molten metal. After the third incident, all work was stopped, and the material was declared Jin Zui, cursed gold. The emperor ordered every piece of it sealed in vaults deep beneath the wall, guarded by priests who would chant for 7 days to silence its power. No one was meant to know where those vaults were. Yet, generations later, every time someone tried to unearth treasure near the wall, something went wrong. In 1482, a Ming general named Zhao Hanhui led an expedition to recover rumored imperial relics hidden near the Badaling section. Within 3 days, half his men fell ill with a sickness no physician could identify, bleeding from the nose, hallucinations, fever that no water could cool. The survivors claimed to see blue fire rising from the ground at night, dancing like the reflections of unseen flames. Zhao ordered the excavation sealed again and executed the surviving diggers to ensure silence. His diary found centuries later ended with a single line, "Gold that remembers burns the hand that dreams." Legends say the curse was not punishment, it was defense. that the treasures buried by the first emperors were more than ornaments or coins. They were instruments, devices meant to manipulate Earth's energy, what ancient Taoists called the dragon veins. The emperors, hungry for control, may have tried to use them to channel life force itself, to bind the nation's destiny to their own. But the power was unstable. The records speak of an eruption of breath, a storm of light that turned men into shadows on stone. Terrified, the emperor ordered the artifact sealed forever, locked behind walls that would outlive his empire. In the Han archives, a later scholar writes cryptically, the emperor took the heaven's heart and buried it beneath the world's skin. What was the heaven's heart? Some believe it refers to a meteorite core, perhaps metallic hydrogen, still unknown to modern science. Others think it was symbolic the emperor's own soul, cursed by immortality's failure. But the legends persist that whatever was buried pulsed with energy, the same rhythmic hum that modern instruments now detect every 88 seconds beneath the wall. Could the curse simply be ancient technology, still alive after 2 millennia? One Qing dynasty traveler, Li Zhongmin, wrote that villagers near the wall spoke of nights when the ground would glow faintly, revealing patterns like rivers of gold beneath the surface. They called it dragon's breath, but some said it was treasure shining through the earth. He described one man who tried to dig where the light appeared. By dawn, his hair had turned white, his tools rusted, and his house burned from the inside out. When villagers approached, the man's body was fused with the soil, his skin hardened like bronze. They built a shrine over the spot, and no one ever dug again. Superstitions grew stronger with every dynasty. In the Ming period, treasure hunters who claimed to find ancient coins with the emperor's seal soon disappeared. Their families swore the coins melted overnight, leaving behind black stains shaped like hands. In the Qing era, officials banned all mining near the wall, citing spiritual contamination. And yet, secretly, many believed the emperor's treasure still called to the living not for greed, but for remembrance. As one monk wrote in the 1700s, the gold beneath the wall is not wealth, it is warning. It remembers who buried it and why. In the modern age, when radar imaging and magnetic surveys began scanning under the wall, scientists noticed irregular metallic anomalies, dense pockets of non-geological material buried far deeper than any construction layer. Their composition? Unknown alloys, rich in mercury traces. Mercury, the same substance found in the terracotta emperor's tomb, said to represent rivers of immortality. Could these anomalies be the same cursed treasures described in ancient texts? Could the emperors have buried the same deadly substance across their empire, turning the land itself into a chemical labyrinth of preservation and poison? One environmental scientist studying soil near the Jiangguan sector reported mercury levels hundreds of times higher than normal background concentrations. The readings were consistent with sealed metallic containers leaking vapor through microscopic fractures, the same toxic atmosphere described in the legends. His team was ordered to stop immediately. Officially, the reason was contamination risk. Unofficially, he told a colleague, "There's something breathing down there." But perhaps the real curse wasn't chemical. Perhaps it was psychological, a contagion of obsession. Many of those who searched for the emperor's treasure met with ruin long before they touched gold. The Han general Li Guang lost his army in a sandstorm chasing rumors of jade coffins. A Qing scholar went blind copying inscriptions said to contain the language of heaven. Even in the 20th century, amateur explorers vanished while tracing electromagnetic anomalies near Inner Mongolia's sections of the wall. Their last radio transmission was a single phrase repeated 3 times. The ground is glowing. Archaeologists today often laugh at curses, but they admit that history's most dangerous secrets are rarely magical, they're technological. Mercury rivers, self-sealing alloys, unknown energy sources all would appear supernatural to ancient eyes. Perhaps the emperors weren't hiding mystical curses, but catastrophic inventions. Devices meant to control life and death that instead warped everything around them. To protect their legacy, they buried the remains, called it sacred, and threatened damnation to anyone who disturbed it. Over centuries, fear became myth, and myth became protection. Yet the legends agree on one haunting detail, that the curse has a voice. It doesn't kill instantly. It whispers first. Miners hear it as a ringing in the ears. Soldiers feel it as a pressure in their chest. Explorers describe it as a thought that isn't theirs, a memory of standing before a golden light that asks, "Are you ready to forget?" The first emperors may have discovered something that broke the line between power and madness. They ruled by heaven's will, but perhaps they found a way to touch heaven too closely, and what they touched whispered back. That whisper became the curse. Not death, but endless memory, because to remember the forbidden is to live its echo. So they buried it every artifact, every coin, every piece of light metal that refused to dull. They buried it under soldiers, under stone, under time. They turned the wall itself into a coffin for a civilization's greed. And now, when modern sensors rediscover the same metallic pulse, the same rhythm of breath, it's not just physics responding, it's the curse reawakening the echo of emperors who swore that no one after them would own the world they tried to build. Perhaps the treasure isn't gold at all. Perhaps it's the memory of what mankind once dared to control and what it had to destroy to survive. The emperor's curse was never a spell, it was a choice, to protect the world from its own reflection. And so, beneath the Great Wall's endless shadow, the heart of the empire still beats locked in darkness, glittering in silence, waiting for another fool to think he can claim eternity. Because the true curse of treasure is that someone, somewhere, will always try. For centuries, people believed the Great Wall was a monument to the past, a relic of battles long won, of empires long dust. But what if it wasn't only a defense against history, but a preparation for what's still to come? Because beneath the stones, beneath the sealed doors and cursed treasures, are whispers of something far more terrifying. That the wall hides weapons not forged for ancient wars, but for a war that hasn't happened yet. It began as rumor among the researchers themselves. After the metallic readings and forbidden vaults were discovered, military scientists reviewing the data noticed something unsettling. The energy signatures didn't behave like residual fields or geological echoes. They behaved like dormant technology, pulses repeating at precise intervals, cycling between frequencies like calibration tests, power signatures that rose and fell as if waiting for activation. Someone asked the question no one dared to. What if it's not broken? What if it's asleep? When this theory leaked, local rumors flared. Villagers spoke of dragon bones that could breathe fire when angered by the stars. Soldiers guarding restricted sectors whispered about tremors underfoot that felt like marching, not quakes. And then came the strangest discovery. Fragments of metallic spheres, unearthed after a mudslide near the Yanmen Pass. Each fragment was smooth, curved, and impossibly light. Microscopic analysis revealed interlocking crystalline lattices not natural, not man-made in any modern sense. The material seemed engineered to channel electrical current through geometric harmonics, converting energy into vibration. But vibration for what purpose? When one of the fragments was placed near a magnetic coil, it resonated, producing a low hum that increased in pitch until the coil itself overheated. The experiment was stopped before failure. The scientist in charge simply said, "It doesn't absorb power, it learns it." The fragments were sent to a defense laboratory in Beijing. Weeks later, the site was sealed without explanation. Unofficially, one technician claimed the material began to emit bursts of microwave radiation at regular intervals, the same 88-second pulse seen in the sub-foundation scans. When the team graphed the intervals, the pattern wasn't random. It formed coordinates points along the wall itself, like a network connecting hundreds of unseen nodes. To the military, it looked like a weapon grid. To historians, it looked like prophecy. Documents declassified decades later mention Project Long Sleep, a quiet initiative launched to study ancient geoenergetic structures of strategic potential. It concluded that several buried metallic chambers beneath the wall could theoretically act as resonators, amplifiers capable of channeling electromagnetic fields on a planetary scale. In modern terms, energy weapons. Not the kind that fire beams or explosions, but fields silent, invisible, capable of disabling electronics or even the human nervous system across vast distances. If such a network existed, it would be unlike anything humanity has ever known. A machine buried under civilization, waiting for a signal that hasn't yet come. The theory spread among fringe historians that the first emperor didn't just build the wall to keep invaders out. He built it to mark where the ancient dragon mechanism already lay buried, a relic from a lost age of science, repurposed as protection. When his alchemists spoke of summoning immortality, maybe they weren't brewing potions. Maybe they were experimenting with energy drawn from the earth itself, reawakening what the ancients left behind. And when it grew unstable, when the light burned the air and the ground screamed, he did what any terrified god-king would do. He buried it. He called it treasure, called it sacred, called it forbidden. He built the wall to hold the earth still. In 2016, a new kind of ground scan using neutron muography was conducted covertly along the Inner Mongolia stretch. The images revealed hollow cylindrical shafts extending downward far below the known chambers, some reaching depths of over 600 meters. At the bottom of one, a dense core appeared metallic, spherical, and resonating faintly. When the scan data was converted to acoustic frequency, the output resembled a harmonic chord, identical to those used in weaponized resonance experiments during the Cold War. Physicists analyzing the data joked nervously, "It's either an ancient weapon or the planet's heartbeat." But one geologist didn't laugh. She noticed that the resonance frequency matched that of the Earth's Schumann resonance, 7.83 Hz. If those structures could amplify that natural frequency, they could theoretically manipulate global electromagnetic fields. In short, the wall might not just protect China, it could stabilize the world itself. Old prophecies and Taoist texts mention a metal dragon that sleeps until the stars return to their first alignment. According to calculations, that alignment of 5 major planets forming the same configuration as in 213 BCE will occur again in the 21st century, the same century we're in now. The texts say, when that alignment comes, the earth shall hum like a gong, and the dragon will wake to guard the living. What if those weren't metaphors? What if they were instructions, the activation schedule of a weapon buried in time? As word spread, military interest grew. Engineers speculated the chambers could form part of an ancient defense grid, possibly to protect the Earth from external cosmic events. The metallic lattices, they proposed, might function as antennae, designed to redirect solar radiation or cosmic energy, shielding early civilizations from catastrophe. If so, the wall might have been humanity's first planetary defense system, one built not by modern nations, but by forgotten architects who understood frequencies and magnetic harmonics long before electricity was known. But if those systems are still active, still pulsing, then the danger isn't that they'll fail. It's that they'll wake. The legends say the emperors placed curses over the buried machines not to protect treasure, but to ensure no one tried to use them again. One poem from the Han era reads, "Beneath the wall of heaven's breath sleeps fire that drinks the soul of men. Disturb it not, lest heaven mourn twice." The fire that drinks souls might sound poetic, but it eerily resembles plasma ionized energy capable of vaporizing matter. A curse to the ancients, to us, perhaps, a reactor. More recent folklore from northern villages speaks of nights when lightning travels through the wall without clouds. Witnesses described streaks of blue-white illumination running along the ridge during thunderstorms, energy traveling horizontally, as if conducted through hidden veins. Photographs from 2008 show faint, glowing lines visible from orbit, later dismissed as camera artifacts. Yet the patterns match the path of those same radar-mapped metallic conduits. If they're absorbing lightning, storing it, or redirecting it, then what happens when the energy builds too much? Maybe that's why the wall was reinforced across dynasties, not because it was weakening, but because something beneath was growing restless. There's a phrase repeated across multiple sources, ancient and modern alike. When the sky burns twice, the buried fire shall answer. Some scholars think it refers to solar storms or celestial alignments, but in secret military documents from the 1960s, declassified only recently, that exact phrase was used as code for nuclear launch readiness. Coincidence or continuity? Rumors persist of a Cold War-era expedition beneath the wall's western edge, led by joint Soviet and Chinese scientists. The operation's files vanished, but whispers claim they discovered vast hollow caverns lined with reflective alloy. One witness allegedly said it looked like the inside of a cannon aimed at the sky. The site was sealed, its coordinates erased. To this day, satellites detect an unexplained magnetic void at that exact location. So, what if those ancient architects built something so powerful, so vast, that it became the reason civilizations rose where they did and fell when they forgot how to control it. A planetary-scale weapon, a failsafe buried beneath humanity's oldest shield. Its trigger not mechanical, but cosmic, awaiting the same configuration of stars that last saw it burn. And if it activates again, it won't be to wage the wars of men. It will be to finish whatever war began before history, a war between worlds, or perhaps between eras. Modern scientists still monitor faint radio anomalies from beneath the wall. They're rhythmic, structured, almost language-like. And the strangest part? Every transmission ends the same way, with a frequency shift that sounds eerily human, like a whisper caught in static. When slowed down and filtered, one recording revealed a pattern that translated roughly to a phrase in archaic Chinese phonetics. The phrase meant, "await command." Maybe that's why the wall endures while everything else decays. Maybe it's not just the past's monument, it's the future's bunker. And maybe, just maybe, the first emperors didn't build it to protect themselves from others. They built it to protect others from themselves. Because the most dangerous weapons are not those designed to kill, but those designed to remember what they were made for. And under the Great Wall, something still remembers. When whispers of the metallic grid and the hidden weapons began to spread, curiosity turned into fear. The more scientists uncovered, the more the ground itself seemed to resist. And soon, the resistance wasn't only from the soil, it came from the sky, the silence, and the men in uniform who arrived before dawn. The last excavation team to receive official clearance under the Cultural Heritage Bureau was scheduled for May 2021. Their mission? To drill into a suspected hollow chamber beneath the northern ridge of the Great Wall near Zhangjiakou. The team of 30 included archaeologists, geologists, and technicians from 3 universities. But on the morning of departure, military convoys arrived at the staging site. Trucks, unmarked. Drones overhead. Soldiers carrying equipment not meant for excavation, but for containment. Within hours, the scientists were escorted out. The official reason? Regional instability and safety concerns. Yet, everyone knew the land had been still for centuries. What wasn't still was what lay below it. Some of the researchers tried to appeal. They had permits, state funding, academic oversight, but the soldiers weren't answering to the Ministry of Culture. They were answering to something higher. A task force only known internally as Division 418, rumored to specialize in non-terrestrial energy research. It was the same designation used in a classified document from 2017 describing subsurface electromagnetic anomalies of potential defense significance. Those anomalies matched perfectly with the radar maps of the hidden metallic lattice beneath the wall. By evening, the entire camp was cleared. Diggers dismantled, power generators shut off. Every laptop, every storage drive was seized. The lead archaeologist, Professor Wen Li, later told a journalist under anonymity, "They didn't tell us to stop. They told us to forget." The site was fenced off that same night. New warning signs appeared along the path, not from heritage departments, but from the military bright red placards that read, "Restricted Geological Survey Zone, High Voltage Risk." The word voltage was a lie. There were no power lines there. There never had been. 2 weeks later, satellite images showed the entire area under blackout. No civilian drones, no GPS signals, no thermal imaging allowed. It was as if the land itself had been erased from the map. Locals reported hearing rhythmic noises at night, distant thuds, mechanical yet muffled, like something heavy being lowered into the ground. When asked what they saw, one shepherd said simply, "The army is feeding the mountain." This was not the first time. Records show at least 5 separate archaeological teams over the last 30 years were turned away just before drilling. Each time, the reason changed: weather instability, radiation hazard, unexploded ordnance, but the pattern never did. Each team had been within 48 hours of breaching a sealed chamber when the military intervened, and every time, their data vanished. One former researcher, speaking from exile, claimed that the real reason for the shutdowns wasn't fear of damage to heritage, it was activation risk. According to him, seismic sensors picked up micro-resonances whenever the soil was disturbed near the vaults, as though the structures beneath were reacting to vibration. The readings intensified when drills approached. It was like knocking on something that could wake up, he said, and the military didn't want to see what would answer. Some team members tried to go public. A young technician uploaded part of the radar footage to a private server. The file contained an image of what looked like a circular gate embedded deep within rock, smooth, metallic, perfectly symmetrical. The next day, the file disappeared. The account was deleted, and the technician's ID number was reported as non-existent. The others took the hint. In late 2022, a foreign documentary crew attempted to film along restricted portions of the wall. They were stopped by soldiers carrying radiation detectors. The crew was told the area was unsafe due to ancient ore contamination. Yet, according to official maps, the region had no known mineral deposits. The soldiers' detectors weren't standard Geigers, they were electromagnetic scanners. One cameraman swore he saw a faint bluish glow ripple through the soil when lightning struck nearby, followed by a tremor that lasted several seconds. Their footage was confiscated. By 2023, the entire northern corridor of the wall was reclassified under the National Defense Zone. Any excavation now required joint clearance from both the Academy of Sciences and the Strategic Support Force. Archaeology had become espionage. What was once a heritage site had turned into a classified perimeter. Rumors among local villagers spread faster than the government's silence could contain. They spoke of convoys moving at night trucks with sealed containers, escorted by black vans without license plates. Some claimed to see equipment marked with foreign characters, English, Russian, even Hebrew, suggesting cooperation beyond China's borders. What could unite rival powers beneath one wall? Whatever it was older than politics and heavier than truth. Satellite analysts later discovered something stranger. Infrared images showed new structures built not on the wall, but beside it, massive rectangular buildings with cooling vents and shielded roofs, the kind used for energy storage or quantum computing. Each one positioned precisely over the coordinates of a known forbidden vault. The architecture was military, but the design looked defensive, as though built to contain something, not to extract it. When a Western journalist tried to question a defense official, he received a single reply before the line went dead. Some walls are not meant to be restored. Since then, even whispers of unauthorized excavation have ended abruptly. A geology professor from Beijing University disappeared after posting photos of magnetic anomalies along the wall's ridge. His social media accounts were erased within hours. One of his colleagues later found his hard drive still spinning, the last file open, was a graph of repeating electromagnetic peaks, with a handwritten note beside it, heartbeat confirmed. But the fear among the scientific community runs deeper than censorship. Many suspect the military isn't just preventing excavation. They're maintaining something already active. The theory goes that the buried network, those ancient metallic chambers, still serves a purpose. If the energy patterns remain stable, the world above stays stable too. But if the seals are broken, if those vaults open, it could trigger phenomena we're not equipped to understand. One anonymous engineer compared it to a reactor. You don't open the reactor to see what's inside. You keep it sealed because it's the only thing holding the system together. Some believe the military discovered that disturbing the structures alters local electromagnetic fields, even weather. A classified memo leaked in 2020 referenced temporary disruptions in atmospheric ionization correlating with subsurface scans. It concluded that continued interference with the anomaly may provoke global resonance anomalies. In simpler terms, tampering with the vaults might trigger planetary effects. Whether myth or fact, it was enough to justify full lockdown. Still, independent groups continue to try. In the winter of 2024, a small academic collective attempted a covert dig near Gansu. They never even touched the ground. Within 30 minutes of setting up, unmarked drones appeared overhead, hovering silently before forcing them to leave. When they checked their car's GPS later, the route had vanished, wiped from every device, as if the road never existed. Even locals feel the shift. Farmers report hearing deep tones at night, like the echo of a distant horn. Animals avoid certain valleys. Smartphones lose signal without reason. The wall itself seems to hum not loudly but persistently, like a sleeping engine. And though the government calls these natural phenomena, no one can explain why military patrols have doubled along areas officially described as inactive. There's a sense now not of discovery, but of countdown. That beneath the ancient stones, something watches back. and that the military isn't guarding us from what we might find. They're guarding what's beneath from being disturbed before its time. A former radar specialist once said in an encrypted message, "The wall isn't a monument, it's a lid, and the people guarding it are just making sure it stays shut." Perhaps that's why every attempt to dig closer ends in silence, because silence, here, is safety. And noise, any vibration, any hammer, any question too deep, might remind the buried machine that the world above it still moves. The military doesn't have to threaten anyone anymore. The wall itself does the talking. When you stand at its base on a windless night, it's said you can feel that low hum beneath your feet, rising just enough to touch your heartbeat. A reminder that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to be contained. At first, they thought it was just background noise, the kind of natural radiation that seeps up from minerals or cosmic particles. But then the numbers started rising, quietly, inexplicably, from deep beneath the Great Wall's sealed foundations. When the military locked down the excavation zones, they claimed it was for safety. What they didn't say was that safety meant radiation, not from nuclear waste or reactors, but from something older and still active. It began in 2021, after the final civilian research teams were forced to withdraw. Local villagers living near the blocked sections started reporting strange illnesses, dizziness, fatigue, nosebleeds that worsened at night. Livestock refused to graze near certain areas, where the grass grew pale and brittle as if scorched by invisible fire. Farmers who used handheld dosimeters noticed the readings spike unpredictably. In daylight, normal. After dark, double. In storms, 10 times higher. The numbers didn't make sense. They weren't consistent with any natural isotope decay. They pulsed in intervals, like a heartbeat of invisible energy rising through the soil. Independent physicists managed to smuggle in portable spectrometers, hoping to prove these stories wrong. What they found made even the skeptics go silent. The radiation wasn't random. It carried a repeating energy signature, oscillating between gamma and microwave frequencies, far too structured to be geological. The pattern matched the same 88-second pulse that had haunted every other mystery beneath the wall. Each spike appeared in sync with the faint electromagnetic hum detected decades earlier, as though the ground itself was exhaling light. The government blamed residual magnetism from military equipment. But those who measured it knew the truth. Magnetism doesn't fluctuate with lunar cycles, and it doesn't whisper through stone. The spikes grew stronger near blocked access tunnels areas sealed after the discovery of the sealed doors. Some of these tunnels had been filled with concrete, yet the radiation still bled through. The strangest part? It wasn't spreading outward. It was breathing. It rose and fell as if something below were charging and discharging energy, an ancient pulse, older than empire. A private geophysical lab later confirmed that the readings weren't typical gamma emissions. The energy wavelength sat between gamma and ultraviolet, a band rarely seen in natural conditions, sometimes associated with decaying isotopes under high pressure. But there were no isotopes down there. Instead, the spectral graph showed a sharp harmonic resonance, like radiation passing through crystal. It behaved not as destructive energy, but as communication, a field transmitting information through light. The scientists had only seen similar patterns once before in deep space cosmic bursts. When they released a summary online, the post disappeared within hours. The lab's director, Dr. Luo Jian, was detained under the State Secrets Act. His colleagues said he'd been obsessed with an idea, that the radiation wasn't harmful at all. It was a message repeating endlessly beneath the wall. In his last notebook, found after his arrest, he'd written only one phrase: "The light is talking." Locals soon began calling the phenomenon the dragon's fever. During the hottest summer nights, the wall itself seemed to shimmer. Soldiers patrolling the restricted zones reported instruments malfunctioning, compasses spinning, Geiger counters screaming. The hum beneath their feet grew so intense that one guard claimed it vibrated through his bones like a second pulse. When he removed his dosimeter, its needle was jammed beyond limit. Yet, strangely, the soldiers stationed there never showed signs of radiation sickness. Only civilians did. It was as if the energy chose who to touch or who could bear it. Satellite imaging picked up faint ultraviolet glows along the wall's contour during these events, thin, shifting lines moving like veins. Analysts dismissed it as lens distortion until they noticed the lines formed patterns, spirals, grids, and at times, characters resembling ancient seal script. One image even displayed a formation matching the Chinese word for return. When converted to contour maps, the glowing lines aligned exactly with the blocked excavation corridors every place the military had sealed. Engineers brought in to study the containment reported that the air near these sections carried static so dense it interfered with radio and Bluetooth devices. Laptops shut down without reason, batteries drained. Even the clocks on digital watches began running irregularly, losing or gaining seconds every hour. Radiation, the scientists knew, can distort electronics, but not like this. This wasn't destruction, it was manipulation, as if time itself was being subtly rewritten by the field. One technician recorded something astonishing. At precisely 3:11 a.m., his dosimeter spiked to 15 times baseline for exactly 22 seconds, then dropped to zero, absolute zero, as if the area around him had been drained of all radiation entirely. In that brief window, his camera captured a faint beam rising from the ground, a narrow column of blue light no thicker than a strand of hair, reaching upward into the sky. It lasted a blink, then vanished. When he reviewed the footage later, the video was blank. Only the audio remained a low, rhythmic sound, almost like breathing. Rumors spread that the spikes weren't natural at all. They were signals. Tests from multiple sites revealed synchronized peaks separated by hundreds of kilometers, rising and falling in perfect unison. It was as though the sealed vaults were communicating, sending energy between themselves through the rock. Some physicists called it impossible. Others called it proof. Whatever the truth, those who tried to model the phenomenon noticed an alarming trend. The intervals were shortening. The pulses were coming faster. In ancient texts, there's a passage that has once seemed metaphorical, but now feels eerily literal. When the dragon's breath quickens, the wall will bleed light. The scholars who wrote it couldn't have known about radiation or electromagnetism, yet their words describe exactly what modern instruments now detect. The earth's breath turning luminous, the stones themselves glowing with invisible fire. By mid-2023, military containment escalated. Concrete barricades appeared near affected sections. Radiation warning symbols replaced the usual heritage signs. Civilians were told to avoid the areas due to environmental hazards. Yet insiders whispered that the soldiers stationed there carried not Geigers, but resonance sensors devices built to detect harmonic frequency, not radiation. Whatever was happening wasn't poisoning the land, it was waking it. Then came the earthquake, a small, localized tremor along the wall's northern flank. It lasted only 8 seconds, barely noticeable, but radiation detectors across the entire corridor spiked simultaneously, recording the highest levels ever, over 400 microsieverts per hour, enough to sterilize soil within days. When teams returned weeks later, they found the ground strangely warm, though no heat source remained. And the air? The air shimmered with faint luminescence, like dust catching starlight. It wasn't hot. It wasn't visible to the eye, only to sensors tuned to ultraviolet. Something had pulsed beneath them, too brief to understand, too immense to measure. A declassified memo circulated quietly among research circles. Its title, Photonic Event 418. It described the spikes as localized surges of non-ionizing radiation resembling coherent light transmission. In simple terms, lasers from underground. The memo ended with one chilling line. Origin undetermined, frequency appears intentional. If true, that means something beneath the wall is releasing energy deliberately, rhythmically, and perhaps intelligently. The radiation spikes aren't the decay of buried weapons or the residue of cosmic minerals. They're communication pulses, or worse, calibration signals, testing the system's readiness, a weapon waking itself. Several independent observers claim the spikes now follow global events. During major solar storms, readings intensify. During wars, they peak. Some believe the wall's buried mechanisms react to human conflict, as if measuring our chaos, waiting for the moment the world crosses a threshold. The future war the legends always warned about. A Taoist prophecy from the Tang era reads, "When the fire beneath speaks with the fire above, the age of stone will end." Scholars once thought it meant the fall of dynasties. But what if it's literal when solar radiation from the sky aligns with the Earth's hidden radiation below, completing a circuit dormant for thousands of years. Whatever the answer, the wall's restricted zones continue to expand. Radiation monitors flicker even miles away. Some nights, satellites record faint, geometric patterns glowing across the desert like circuitry etched into the planet. And the pulses keep shortening 88 seconds, then 86, then 84. A countdown, perhaps, or a synchronization, pulling closer to something only the buried network understands. When asked why the military doesn't simply remove civilians altogether, one official reportedly replied, "Because they need witnesses. No one would believe it otherwise." So the guards remain, the fences rise, the detectors scream, and beneath it all, the dragon hums louder, leaking light that no sun ever made. Maybe the Great Wall wasn't built to stop an army, maybe it was built to contain a star, and now that star is remembering its name. The deeper they looked, the older the mystery became, until time itself started to lose meaning. The Great Wall, they realized, wasn't simply a monument that survived history. It might be the one thing that preserved something outside it. Because no matter how far scientists dug, no matter how many instruments pulsed through its stones, they kept finding the same truth staring back. There were things beneath the wall that didn't belong to any known civilization, or even to this timeline. The idea first emerged quietly not from fringe theorists or mystics, but from physicists studying isotopic decay. Samples taken near the sealed sections showed atomic ratios inconsistent with the age of the surrounding rock. One layer of fused material dated not to 2,000 years ago, but to something closer to 50 million. Impossible, unless time itself had folded, preserving a fragment of the world that predated humanity. The metals buried below weren't corroded. They were timeless, immune to decay, as if locked inside a bubble where entropy didn't apply. At first, scientists blamed contamination, but deeper analyses revealed something stranger: the isotopes were inverted, their half-lives running in reverse. In other words, the material wasn't aging, it was unaging, as if whatever was sealed beneath the Great Wall existed in a frozen state of becoming, caught between past and future. Historians didn't know what to do with that. Some called it a hoax. Others whispered the unthinkable, that the wall wasn't built on top of something ancient, but around something preserved, a relic not from human history, but from a forgotten version of it. The question spread like a ghost through scientific circles. Could something be preserved that defies history itself? A fragment of an ancient Taoist scroll found near Dunhuang speaks of a mountain that remembers its first shape, and a wall that binds the time of heaven. For centuries, scholars thought it was poetic mysticism. But what if it wasn't? What if the ancients knew not just intuitively, but experientially, that the ground beneath them held relics of an earlier age of Earth, a cycle before ours? In Tibetan texts, there's a myth of the three histories. The first, the world of stone where gods shaped continents. The second, the world of memory where men walked but did not yet die. The third, our world built from the ashes of the first two. The myth claims that the boundaries between these worlds overlap at certain places, walls of power, where time folds inward. If true, then perhaps the Great Wall's foundations mark one of those boundaries, a seam where remnants of the first or second world were sealed before they could infect the third. Modern physics might call it something else, a space-time preservation field, a localized distortion where time doesn't progress linearly but loops, keeping matter indefinitely intact. The radiation spikes, the strange harmonics, the reversed isotopes, all could be signatures of that kind of anomaly. If such a field were active beneath the wall, then it wouldn't just preserve artifacts. It could preserve moments, frozen instants of pre-human history, still existing, still echoing inside a closed time bubble. Some researchers speculate that this temporal preservation might explain the impossible discoveries made around the wall's perimeter. Microfossils fused into man-made stone, carbon traces that predate the mortar, and geological formations showing magnetic polarity reversed as if time briefly flowed backward when the stones were laid. If the wall was built around an existing anomaly, its builders might have unknowingly encased a fragment of an earlier timeline, a pocket of the earth that refused to die. There's even a chilling possibility that the ancient engineers knew exactly what they were doing. One theory banned from publication proposes that the first emperors learned how to anchor time itself. The forbidden vaults weren't tombs or reactors, but stabilizers, temporal anchors designed to pin a piece of history in place. To the outside world, it became myth, a treasure, a curse, a sleeping dragon. But to those who understood, it was preservation, an attempt to save something from erasure. What could be so important that an entire civilization would rewrite its destiny to protect it? Legends tell of an object called the Stone of Breath, said to contain the memory of the Earth's first dawn. Some believe it's a metaphor for consciousness the moment awareness first entered the universe. Others think it was literal, a core fragment of an ancient celestial body that carried information, not in DNA, but in radiation and resonance, the same frequencies detected beneath the wall today. A forgotten Jesuit record from the 1600s describes a local monk claiming that beneath the northern ridges lies a chamber that holds the shadow of creation itself. He warned that those who open it will see what the world was before it began and forget themselves. For centuries it sounded like parable. But now, with modern data showing time anomalies, that warning feels disturbingly literal. One researcher from the National Time Studies Institute, before his resignation, described a phenomenon he called chronon bleed. In simple terms, the ground around the sealed sections emitted low-level temporal distortion, capable of slightly altering decay rates and even human perception of time. People working near the site reported losing minutes, hours, even whole memories. Some swore they heard voices that spoke in languages unknown, but when played back on recorders, the voices came out as reversed audio. It was as though time itself was looping, remembering in reverse. If true, it means something beneath the wall isn't just old, it's outside chronology, a preserved fragment of another order of existence. Maybe that's why the wall's myth endures, because it's not merely ancient, it's eternal. A monument built to contain an accident in time, a tear in the world's continuity. Some physicists, after studying leaked data, propose that the wall might have been deliberately placed at the intersection of geomagnetic lines, where space-time distortions naturally occur. The ancients might have discovered one such rift, and instead of closing it, they caged it, embedding the wall's foundations with materials capable of maintaining equilibrium. The radiation we detect today might be the leak, the bleed of preserved reality escaping into ours, like steam from a sealed engine. That's why the stones never crumble the way they should, why the compass needles tremble, why people feel watched when they stand alone by the wall at night. It isn't just memory, it's proximity to something that has never aged, something that remembers the world before history, before death, before time's arrow began its flight. The ancients wrote, "What is forgotten cannot die, and what is preserved cannot sleep." That line once meant poetry. Now it feels like physics. If something truly is preserved down there, an object, a memory, a fragment of the universe before it fractured into time, then the wall isn't guarding China's borders. It's guarding the edge of reality itself. And if that's true, the legends of the sealed chambers, the buried armies, the metallic hum, all of it might be symptoms of the same underlying truth, that beneath the oldest stones on Earth lies a pocket of existence where history never happened, a wound in time, still beating, still refusing to heal. Perhaps that's why every generation rediscovers the mystery and stops just short of solving it. Because to open the wall completely would not be to reveal the past, but to erase the present. Whatever is preserved there might be what the world once was, a prototype of existence, uncorrupted, unending, unaging, and our history, our empires, our evolution, everything we call real could be just the afterimage of that earlier design. If so, then the Great Wall isn't merely a monument of stone and will. It's the final border between the known and the original. A memory frozen so long, it became matter. A message buried so deep, it became time itself. And perhaps that's why the hum beneath the wall keeps repeating, not as warning, but as remembrance. Because something down there still knows what came before history, and waits, endlessly, for someone to remember with it. Maybe that's the greatest secret of all, that what the wall preserves isn't treasure, or weapons, or even a civilization. It preserves the memory of the first world, the blueprint of creation's earliest attempt. And if it ever wakes, time itself might remember what it was meant to be, before it was broken into past, present, and future. Until then, the hum continues deep, rhythmic, patient, a heartbeat echoing through the bones of the earth, reminding us that somewhere below, the forgotten still breathes, and the Great Wall still stands not just against history, but outside it. If something beneath the Great Wall truly defies history, then perhaps it also defies ownership. And maybe that's why China refuses to let the world see what's buried there. Because some secrets don't belong to any nation, and yet they can destroy one if revealed. Foreign scientists have been requesting access to the restricted sections since the 1980s. Every proposal ends the same way: denied for national security. Archaeologists, physicists, even UNESCO representatives all turned away. Officially, it's to protect a fragile heritage site. Unofficially, it's something else, because no other monument on Earth is guarded with the same military precision as the Great Wall's northern foundation zones. It's not archaeology anymore, it's containment. The ban began quietly. In 1976, a joint Sino-Soviet archaeology program was canceled without reason. Then, in the early 2000s, Japan and Germany proposed an international dig using non-invasive scans. The response from Beijing was unusually blunt. No foreign instruments will penetrate the wall. That phrasing, penetrate, revealed everything. This wasn't about cultural pride. It was about intrusion. The wall, in the eyes of the state, isn't just ancient architecture. It's a vault. And vaults are not studied. They are guarded. Satellite imagery from 2015 showed that military installations had expanded dramatically along certain stretches that had no tourism, no population, and no obvious strategic purpose. Yet, those same coordinates correspond exactly to the forbidden vault grid identified by early radar mapping. Coincidence, the official report said. But what kind of coincidence needs anti-radiation shelters, cooling towers, and underground fiber conduits? Foreign researchers who tried to enter through unofficial channels found themselves monitored, followed, or redirected. One French geologist reported that even when standing miles away, drones appeared overhead within minutes. A single radio call, he said, and the air changed, as if the mountain was listening. After that, no one outside China has come close again. But the question isn't just why China refuses exploration. It's what they are protecting from. The government insists that the wall is a matter of national pride, a symbol of unity, strength, and identity. To open it to outsiders would risk exploitation, they say. Yet those reasons don't explain the secrecy surrounding areas far from tourism zones, the sudden disappearances of data, or the way foreign satellites are blocked from scanning certain corridors. The simplest explanation is usually the right one. There's something beneath the wall that cannot be explained in conventional terms, and it's safer to call it myth than to admit it's real. In 2019, leaked correspondence from a state science agency referenced persistent anomalous fields under heritage zones, requiring isolation from international observation. In plain language, we can't let them measure this. Some say China discovered something too advanced, too alien, or too ancient to share a technology buried long before civilization that still functions. Others think it's worse, not technology at all, but the residue of an event that rewrote the planet's timeline, a phenomenon capable of bending time, radiation, and memory. To the West, that sounds like fantasy, but to China's scholars, it's a burden. Their legends have warned about this for centuries, the sleeping dragon that guards heaven's heart. It's not patriotism that drives secrecy, it's fear. Fear that once the world learns what the wall truly is, the global order collapses. Because if it's proven that something beneath the wall predates recorded history, something intelligent, still active, and beyond human replication, every foundation of science, religion, and sovereignty fractures at once. Imagine what happens when nations realize one country stands atop the world's oldest power source, or its oldest wound. There are whispers within China's academic community that the government has already tried to communicate with what's below. Using electromagnetic resonance arrays, they attempted to ping the vault's frequency, hoping to decode the 88-second pulse. The experiment was immediately classified, but afterward, the region experienced 2 days of electrical blackouts, and atmospheric readings showed faint gamma bursts detectable from orbit. That's when the military sealed the last civilian access. Foreign governments have tried to negotiate. None succeed. In 2022, a quiet diplomatic request from the United States offered shared research funding for geo-harmonic mapping of the wall's substructure. Beijing's reply came in a single sentence: "The wall protects the living from the dead. It was signed by a cultural minister, not a general, but everyone who read it understood that the language wasn't political, it was theological. Even Russian sources claim that early Cold War reconnaissance flights detected radiant anomalies along the wall that interfered with radar and guidance systems. When Moscow inquired, China responded with silence, followed by a shift of anti-air batteries along that very route. It wasn't defense, it was warning. So, why refuse foreign eyes? Because if outsiders dig too deep, they won't just uncover history, they might awaken it. To China, the Great Wall is not an archaeological mystery. It's a cosmic responsibility. The wall, they believe, marks the skin of the world, the seam that separates the living timeline from whatever came before. To disturb it is to reopen a scar older than civilization. One leaked internal memo, translated by a former cultural attaché, put it plainly: foreign exploration cannot proceed because the anomaly does not belong to Earth alone. The line was buried among bureaucratic phrases about heritage and safety, but it lingers like static. What kind of anomaly belongs to something larger than Earth? If the rumors of preserved time, ancient reactors, or sleeping weapons are true, then any international expedition would mean shared control, shared risk. No empire wants to share the apocalypse. China's leadership likely believes that controlling access means controlling the future, or perhaps they fear that even a single mistake, a camera flash, a sonic vibration, could trigger what their ancestors sealed away. In the shadows of this secrecy, science and myth blur into the same silence. There's talk of a doctrine among state researchers called the Quiet Mandate. Its creed: what is buried sustains the sky. The idea that humanity's stability, its gravity, its seasons, its balance depends on something buried. Disturb it, and the world itself might tilt. Perhaps China refuses foreign exploration because it no longer sees the wall as its property. It sees it as its burden, a burden inherited from emperors who once called themselves the sons of heaven, men who knew they were standing atop something not meant for human sight. Western journalists call it paranoia. But maybe it's reverence. Maybe the silence isn't censorship, but ritual, a continuation of an ancient commandment written in stone: do not wake the dragon. And maybe, deep down, every nation understands. Because if the wall hides evidence that human history isn't the first that civilizations have risen and fallen before recorded time, then the question shifts from why won't China allow exploration to why would anyone want to? The more technology advances, the closer we get to truths we aren't built to handle. Perhaps the wall's greatest wisdom is that it stays silent, because sometimes, to preserve the world, you must protect it from its own curiosity. That's why the soldiers still patrol, why the satellites blink out when they pass overhead, why the permission letters always come back stamped denied. Because somewhere beneath the stones, something waits that does not know what century it is. And if the ground remembers too much, if it recognizes the world above, it might decide that history's end was only postponed, not prevented. Until then, the wall endures silent, guarded, eternal, and China keeps its promise to the dead, to never let the past wake again. What do the sealed chambers truly guard? Not gold, not bones, not weapons or kings. Something older, something that remembers before memory began. When the last instruments fell silent and the last scientist left the ridge, the hum beneath the Great Wall never stopped. It kept pulsing, slow and steady, like the heartbeat of a creature dreaming through stone. And every pulse carried a truth no one wanted to face, that what sleeps beneath the wall was never meant to die, and never meant to be found. At first, the sealed chambers were believed to be tombs, then machines, then vaults of knowledge. But each theory only brushed against a single face of something too vast to name. The deeper researchers went, the more the evidence turned paradoxical. The metal that doesn't corrode, the radiation that speaks, the time that folds inward. Everything pointed toward one impossible conclusion. The chambers do not guard what's beneath them. They guard what's beyond them. Every reading, every legend, every forbidden line of scripture hints at the same geometry. 9 vaults arranged in a spiral, converging toward an empty center. The ancients called that center the breathless eye. Modern models call it a temporal null point, a place where time cancels itself. Imagine a wound in reality stitched with stone, each chamber a lock, keeping the world from remembering what was once open. The ancient records say the first emperor sealed heaven's wound with the bones of men. For centuries, that line was dismissed as poetic excess. But recent scans of the deepest layers reveal a cavity so large that radar cannot map its bottom. The energy field surrounding it bends radio waves. Light sent in does not return. It is as if the signal falls into silence, not absorbed, but forgotten. The void at the center of the wall is not empty. It is memory itself, inverted. Physicists studying the harmonic resonance noted a strange property. The pulses accelerate in direct proportion to human attention. The more the site is observed, the stronger the signal becomes. It's as though the anomaly feeds on consciousness. One researcher described it as an echo that grows louder the more you listen. Perhaps that's why the military forbade foreign eyes not just to keep secrets, but to reduce awareness. The wall isn't protecting something dangerous from people. It's protecting people from the danger of knowing it exists. Somewhere deep inside those sealed chambers, there may be an artifact, or perhaps a being that predates humanity entirely. Ancient Sumerian and Chinese myths both describe an age when the sky fell into the earth, when knowledge and matter fused. The result was said to be a heart of metal that beats without life. What if that heart still beats, buried beneath mountains and empires, wrapped in walls, sealed by generations who understood that the only way to survive a god is to imprison it? A 15th century Taoist inscription found on a forgotten stone tower reads, "The dragon's body became the land. The dragon's mind became the law, and its dream became the wall." If that inscription is literal, the Great Wall might not just mark the dragon's spine, it is the spine. The chambers, then, are not vaults, they're vertebrae, each one carrying a fragment of consciousness too vast for a single age to bear. When the emperor's priests spoke of guarding heaven's mandate, perhaps they meant maintaining the sleep of what lies below. Because if the dragon wakes, if the field breaks, the preserved memory of the first world could flood into ours, rewriting reality as it remembers itself. That would explain the time distortions, the isotopes aging backward, the radiation that hums instead of burns. The wall might not simply contain the past, it might be holding back the return of an earlier version of existence. There's evidence for this in data quietly leaked from seismic observatories. Every 88-second pulse, the same rhythm recorded for decades, isn't perfectly consistent. It carries micro-fluctuations corresponding to the rotation of the Earth. As if the chambers adjust themselves, synchronizing to planetary motion, like a heart recalibrating to a living body. The wall may be alive in a way we don't yet understand, a global organism whose purpose is to regulate the border between now and before. Ancient prophecy warns, when the pulse and the breath become one, the second sky will fall. Some interpret this as the alignment of the chamber's resonance with the human collective mind, a moment when curiosity itself might trigger the system to open. In modern terms, that could mean the act of discovering the truth might be the very key that unlocks the vault. Knowledge as the trigger, awareness as the weapon. That is why no foreign nation is allowed to probe deeper. Not because China owns the secret, but because no one does. The wall doesn't belong to an empire, it belongs to the planet, and the sealed chambers guard the equilibrium between what is and what was. Yet, there's a darker possibility whispered even within the state's own laboratories. What if the system was never meant to stay dormant? What if it's slowly reactivating on schedule, following a cosmic cycle too vast for human calendars? The radiation spikes, the harmonic shortening, the accelerated pulses, they could all be signs of reawakening. The wall might not be keeping something in anymore. It might be preparing to release it. No one knows what that would mean. Would the chambers open like gates, revealing a buried world still glowing beneath the crust? Would time itself unravel, dragging the present into the memory of the first civilization? Or would everything simply stop, the hum ceasing, the pulse gone, the earth finally exhaling the secret it's held since before history began? There's an eerie calm in knowing we might never find out, because the wall still stands, unbroken, unmoving, carrying the silence of 2,000 years like a monk guarding his last breath. The soldiers who patrol it don't know what they're guarding. The scientists who measure it can't explain what they're feeling. But all of them sense it, that faint vibration beneath their boots, like a warning whispered through stone. And maybe that's the answer. Maybe the sealed chambers don't guard treasure, or power, or gods. Maybe they guard balance, the fragile equilibrium between remembering and forgetting. between creation and collapse, between the world that was and the world that borrowed its body. Because if the Great Wall ever falls, if the chambers are ever broken open, the dragon won't rise in fire. It will rise in silence, a silence so deep it erases everything that came after, a silence older than language, older than matter, the sound of the universe before it decided to exist. That's what the sealed chambers guard, the origin that never ended, the breath that began everything, still trapped beneath the stones, waiting for the day the world stops being afraid to hear it again. And maybe that's the final lesson of the wall, that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some are meant to hold the world together by staying unanswered. So the hum continues, and the soldiers watch, and the mountains keep their secret. And somewhere beneath it all, the first heartbeat of creation still echoes, slow and patient, waiting for history to remember its true beginning.